The island of St Helena, one of the loneliest places on planet Earth. A rocky piece of land in South Atlantic, about 2,000 kilometers from the coast of Africa on one side, and about 4,000 kilometers from the coast of South America on the other. You can cross from one end of the island to the other in 3 hours. Now, on October 15, 1815, 2 British ships drop anchor here, Northumberland and Myrmidon. The former carries a precious cargo, 46-year-old man in a double-cornered hat, who not so long ago had practically the whole of continental Europe at his feet. Now he is being transported as a prisoner to this forgotten place, where he will be able to remind the incredible story he has lived over and over again. A story unparalleled in modern European history. For 15 years, the whole of Europe trembled at the sound of the name Napoleon Bonaparte. Yet when the boy, the second of 8 siblings of a not-so-wealthy Corsican lawyer, was born, it seemed certain that at best he would face the ordinary life of the time. From the age of 10, he attended military schools, where he had problems with discipline and popularity among his classmates, but he was already very ambitious. He studied military strategy, supplementing it with his own opinions, excelled in mathematics, and learned to understand maps perfectly. All this would soon come in handy. In the year 1789, when the revolution breaks out in France, he is 20. He immediately understands that the centuries-old order is suddenly no longer valid, and that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He joins the Republic, joins the Jacobins, and spends the next 4 years trying unsuccessfully to assert himself, especially in his native Corsica. The turning point comes in 1793, when he is entrusted with the attack on the city of Toulon, where an uprising against the Parisian government has broken out. Here, for the first time, Napoleon applies his strategic thinking and his ability to motivate his soldiers. He personally leads his troops in the front line, is wounded, but after heavy fighting, takes the city. For this, he is promoted to the rank of general. He has finally drawn attention to himself. And he goes on. 2 years later, he mercilessly crushes a counter-revolutionary uprising in the streets of Paris. And with similar bravery as at Toulon, he acts as commander of the Italian campaign against the Austrian army in 1796. His star continues to rise steeply. He has the army completely on his side, and is increasingly seen by ordinary French people as a way out of the post-revolutionary turmoil and constant foreign attacks. In 1800, Napoleon appoints himself the first of 3 consuls to govern the country. His power is almost absolute. The other 2 have only an advisory vote. The French people approve changes to the constitution in a referendum, and do not protest even when Napoleon proclaims himself emperor 4 years later in the presence of the Pope at Notre Dame Cathedral. For symbolic reasons, he puts the crown on his head himself, then crowns his wife, Josephine. This is how ended the French Revolution, which in the name of the Republic and the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, executed the king and queen. A year later, Napoleon would be named King of Italy, but his immense power and expansionism were already becoming a thorn in the side of England and Austria, as well as Russia, and other states and territories would gradually be added. From now on, Napoleon will be almost constantly at war against strong coalitions, but he will do well for a long time. In 1805, he recorded a famous victory at Austerlitz, probably the most famous battle ever fought on Czech territory. Thanks to his tactics, which are now considered masterful, he overwhelmingly defeats the Russian-Austrian superiority and finds himself at the peak of popularity at home. Now he would like to make a lasting peace with his enemies, but he will never be allowed to. The French emperor will have to continue to base his power on his successes on the battlefield, but they will be increasingly bloody and painful. At the Battle of Eylau, near present-day Kaliningrad, he is one step away from his first defeat. Eventually, he overcomes the Russian troops and signs a peace treaty with the defeated Russian Tsar Alexander I on a raft in the middle of the Niemen River. At that time, he controlled an incredible part of Europe, from present-day Lithuania to Portugal, and from Hamburg to the Greek islands. In the periods between the war campaigns, he worked intensively on changes in the public life of his country. He carries out financial reform, introduces a new civil code on which the French legal system is still based today, and enacts a law on public teaching. But on the other hand, he will reintroduce corporal punishment, abolish most newspapers and impose rigid censorship, and suck up all conquered foreign territories without mercy. And also, at the age of 40, he divorces his wife Josephine and enters into a politically motivated marriage with the daughter of the Austrian Emperor Francis I, the 19-year-old Maria Louisa. She's the great niece of Queen Marie Antoinette, who was executed by the French during the Revolution. And that's hard to take even for many of his supporters. Many Republicans see it as a betrayal, and Napoleon's popularity is slowly declining. But the worst is yet to come. The Russian Tsar will once again ally with the British, and Napoleon, though reluctantly, decides that this must not go unanswered. He invades Russia with an army of 500,000 and fights a fierce battle outside Moscow, at Borodino, which opens the way to Moscow. But as it soon turns out, it is not a triumph, but an apocalypse. The Russians will abandon the city and burn it all down. Napoleon has no choice but to start his return journey, a journey across the endless plains where the bitter Russian winter is setting in. In addition, Marshal Kutuzov's troops are constantly attacking the retreating French troops. Napoleon's army is being mowed down by thousands by the enemy, hunger, frost, and typhus. The emperor himself at first bravely shares the sufferings of his men, but eventually allows himself to be taken back to France, leaving the wreckage of the glorious Grand Army to its fate. Out of 500,000 soldiers, only 10,000 combat-ready men will return home. This is the beginning of the end. The following October, Napoleon lost his greatest battle ever, the Battle of the Nations at Leipzig, in which the commander-in-chief of the Austrian forces, Prince Philip Schwarzenberg, played a significant role. For Napoleon, it is a crushing defeat from which he will never recover. Abandoned by his generals and people, who have had enough of war and hardship, he signs his abdication and heads into exile on the Italian island of Elba, where the victorious powers will set up a puppet principality for him. But once more the wheel of fate turns. News reaches Elba that discontent is growing in France with the rule of the returning King Louis XVIII, and also that Napoleon's allies want to escort him to a distant island. The former emperor, therefore, with 1,100 soldiers from the army he keeps on Elba, embarks on the seized vessels, and after 3 days lands on the coast of the French Riviera. The military unit that is supposed to stop him refuses to shoot at him, and on the way to the capital, more and more soldiers join him. Louis XVIII makes his escape, and on March 20, Napoleon enters Paris without firing a shot. The period called the 100 Days, or the 100-Day Empire, is beginning. But the return of the hated Corsican cannot be tolerated by his enemies. On June 18, 1815, Napoleon stands on the battlefield in Belgium against a powerful British-Dutch-Prussian coalition. And as the evening approaches, it is clear that this will be beyond the French power. The battle is lost and Napoleon returns to Paris, where he abdicates for the second time 4 days later. In mid-July, he will be handed over to the English and believes he will live out his life in seclusion, under surveillance, somewhere in the British countryside. But he is very wrong about that.